I understand there has been white smoke coming out of the Basilica in Rome, and there's going to be a new pope. While I'm not Catholic, I had huge admiration for Pope Francis, and I hope the church continues in that direction. In that spirit, I'm not going to spend my opening comments talking about all of the challenges presented by the Trump administration, although I'm sure we'll be able to get to those in questions. But I want to highlight a couple of areas where I've, again, been working on in a bipartisan way on issues that are critical to Virginians. The first is housing. There's not a place in Virginia, rural, urban, suburban, where we don't hear about high cost of housing, lack of supply of housing, and we really have to get a lot more innovative. Last week, I talked a bit about the low-income tax credit program that's been around for some time that we're trying to expand, that would add a lot of new supply units. We don't obviously need demand, we need more supply. This week I want to talk about two bipartisan bills that I've put in that I think have real opportunity. One is the Neighborhood Investment Act. This is a legislation that a couple of my colleagues before, Rob Portman and Ben Cardin, carried, that maybe this year we could actually get done, that would look at about 500,000 houses across the country that are already in developed areas, but oftentimes are fairly dilapidated. And this would provide a bit of a beneficial bridge to make sure that rehabbing those houses becomes cost effective. Remember, that helps in terms of restoration of neighborhoods. It's awful to have a neighborhood where you've got a blighted, abandoned house on your street. And also, upgrading these houses, in the long run, actually saves communities money because you've already got an existing street, you've already got existing water and sewer, oftentimes broadband. So this Neighborhood Investment Act, strongly bipartisan, applicable in lots of communities all across Virginia where you've got declining properties that need this extra boost to get rehabbed. The second is focused on affordable housing in rural communities. As somebody who spent a lot of time on issues, for example, around Fannie and Freddie, and I won't get into that, but there are sometimes challenges with these federal housing finance agencies, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, is that there is a higher hurdle rate to get low-income housing built in rural communities. So this bipartisan legislation would encourage our housing finance agencies to put more effort to help bridge the gap a little bit more on rural housing opportunity. As we've talked many times, whether it's housing, whether it's been broadband, whether candidly it's been about FEMA dollars, rural Virginians are not always getting a fair end of the stick, and this bipartisan legislation, again, would, I think, go a long way towards helping build up that affordable housing stock in rural communities all across Virginia. So housing was one area, positive, bipartisan. Second is a lot of work with my dear friend Tim Kaine, I know, who just had an avail a little bit earlier as well. To say, how do we make sure that we preserve the beauty of Virginia? How do we end up making sure that we preserve our legacy around national parks? Let me take them in that order. First, working with Tim, we've got legislation that would increase the number of wilderness designated areas within the Shenandoah Valley, within George Washington National Forest, something that we've been working on for some time, but I think would be a giant step forward. The second is more targeted towards designations in Bath County, a couple of areas that actually I believe passed the Senate last year. So we just need to make sure our House colleagues can take that up and pass it as well. The other is something that I've been involved with now for 8 or 9 years, and that is, how do we deal with the underfunded maintenance and repair at our national parks, monuments, historic sites? I was proud to be the author of Restore Our Parks Act that passed a number of years back, 5 or 6 years back. Virginia received hundreds of millions of dollars. I think about some of the work still being done on the GW Memorial Parkway that funded from that, on literally hundreds of projects across Virginia. That bill is expiring, so we've renamed it the America the Beautiful Act, and we've got a coalition, bipartisan coalition, that will say, how do we keep hacking away at that residual cost of maintenance? The Restore Our Parks Act took down the maintenance that had been deferred, literally billions of dollars, by about half. But while we've whittled away, it does mean as well that there are other maintenance projects have grown over the last 5 years. This is a remarkably successful program, and even in these contentious times, the America the Beautiful Act, if we want to make sure that Americans can visit our national parks, our monuments, our battlefields, And we have as much concentration of these type of historic and national park locations in Virginia as virtually anywhere in the country. We've got to make sure we do our job and preserve that legacy by making sure that we take care of the deferred maintenance. I'm very, very hopeful that the America the Beautiful Act will actually pass this year, and that we'll be able to continue making up for literally in some cases 20 years of deferred maintenance. So with that, why don't I turn it over to Laura and be happy to take your questions.
Senator, our first question is Mitchell Miller with WTOP.
Hi, Senator. Good afternoon. I wanted to ask you a question in connection with air safety. I know you've been weighing in on this recently, and as you're aware, the Transportation Secretary is calling for a major overhaul today. But specifically related to DCA, as you know, helicopters, even though they've been banned, there's still these problems. What are your concerns there, and then more broadly about air traffic controllers?
Well, my concerns are that, for years, American airspace has been the safest of anywhere in the world. And unfortunately, not simply due, but partly due to some of the cuts to the FAA, cuts to air traffic controllers, I'm not sure we're able to still make that claim as strongly. And we had the tragedy back in January. We lost 67 lives with that collision at National. We've had a couple of near misses since that time. And now we've got this military helicopter from the same unit that was involved in the crash back in January, somehow taking the scenic route, it appears, for some kind of VIP. And that just should not be allowed. I mean, this is crazy. We should not put the safety of the traveling public. And I'm glad to see the Transportation Secretary say, I don't understand why this last incident even took place. But let's be careful, or let's acknowledge that this is not just happening here. Up at Newark Airport, we're seeing delays and problems that are enormous. This is what happens when you have a DOGE effort, Elon Musk and the boys, that's candidly more focused on cuts than I fear on safety. And if you sacrifice the responsibilities of the FAA, the Federal Aviation Authority that maintains safety, or if you cut back on air traffic controllers, we knew at National we were understaffed the night of the tragedy back in January. We are at least 3,000 air traffic controllers short. But who's going to want to go be an air traffic controller if you still have this potential cuts hanging over your head? This we'll see firsthand in terms of the ability to sign up people to get into the Air Traffic Controller Academy. It's a multi-year process to get the skills. But this is one of these residual effects as we denigrate our federal workforce and make it kind of an untenable place to work. It also makes it then very, very hard to recruit. So we're going to do everything we can to restore some of those cuts in the budget process. We're going to stay on the Transportation Secretary to make sure at National itself that we don't have any more of these incidents involving the military. But we've got to make safety paramount. We talk about all of the problems we've got with the economy, and we're already seeing declining number of tourists come to America because of the fear that they could actually be swept up in an ISIS raid, or frankly, just the fact that our Canadian friends are just plain pissed at America, and understandably. To add to that, and we in the nation's capital region, we're going to bear the brunt of that this summer with declining tourism numbers. You don't need to add extra safety concerns at National to further drive down our region's economy. We rely on tourism as much as virtually any economy, major metropolitan area in the country, and we will pay the price for that. And it's why we've got to make it safe. We've also got to recognize that as we make our friends around the world angry, they're going to be less willing to come to see the great opportunities and the great history and heritage that we offer in the national capital area. So this is, again, one of the unintended consequences, perhaps, of some of both the unmitigated cuts and, candidly, the ability for this administration in 108 days to basically make almost every one of our friends into, if not an enemy, but a heck of a lot less of a friend.